Okay, we're doing that. And then we also have Ross Williamson with our city attorney's office. Our city attorney is here. I also want to make an announcement to the people in the audience. Thank you. Welcome. We have requests for comment forms at the back table. If you're wanting to speak, if you can fill it out, it will help me. Right now I've got 4, and it will help me know how much time to leave at the end. If there's only 4, that gives us a little bit more time to talk. If I have 10, then we'll stop so that we make sure that people have an opportunity to speak if they so choose. I said that. I've handed out to, I think everybody, we received a couple of email comments. Did everybody get, I think I handed them. I don't know, Mark, if I got those to you. Could you pass those down? And then mention sign-in sheet. Oh, I also wanted to mention for the audience as well, even if you don't want to speak, but you want to be added to the interested parties list, so you get emails of the meeting, any announcements or any information that we want to share. If you fill this out with your email address, then that will allow me to make sure I get you that information. With that, I'm going to share my screen. Maybe. Okay. Hopefully, Jared and Ross, you can see that okay, I think. So I'm doing a presentation just because we have a lot to cover, and I just want to make sure that we have that at the last meeting with the task force, I didn't have some maps, and I think that contributed to some confusion. So I wanted to make sure that we have that in front of us. Page down. Sorry, I'm like playing with this. There we go. Why are you not forwarding? Okay, we're just going to do this. So the first thing on the agenda is status of the phase 1 code update. So I wanted to give you an update. We did go to council on June 20th, I believe. They had a hearing. For those of you that were there, I'm going to give you an opportunity to kind of chime in and talk about your, what you heard, what your perspective was. But I'm sure everybody has heard stuff on social media about this and what's been going on. So I wanted to just kind of give you guys an update. It was a very well attended meeting, and lots of public input, which was wonderful. What we presented to them is what we had talked with the task force about, which was amending the code to define developed parks and public facilities, prohibiting camping in developed parks, which would by default allow camping on any other public property that didn't meet that definition of developed park or public facility. And in the course of explaining that and getting the public input, people became aware that that meant that there was a portion of Mill Creek Park north of the creek that it was near the middle school, as well as near the back 40 forested area, as well as some portions of Riverfront Park. People were concerned about that. And so that's the main thing that people spoke about at the council meeting. This was shared with council at the meeting. Basically, these are the parks that we're talking about, and we shared what that meant as far as the areas that were undeveloped based on what we had talked about. And then provided a little bit more clarity of where we were talking about. And I'm sort of pointing this out. One, we pointed this out to council, but in talking with some of the task force members, it sounds like some of you weren't even fully aware of that. And so I just want to make sure. And the good thing is that we are now getting to the end of that really crunch time where we needed to do something by the 1st of July, and we can take a little bit more time. And I will certainly work harder to make sure that you all understand, and we have a little bit more time to make sure that you all fully understand what it is that you're making recommendations on. So this is what was presented to council, and this is what was commented on. So at the council meeting, after the public input and public comment, essentially council amended the definition of developed park to include the entirety of Mill Creek Park and Riverfront Park, which left the other parcels still available. It's totals about a little over an acre and a quarter. So it's not a ton of areas, but when we looked at the number of homeless people in our point in time count, you figure, 4,000 square feet of space, which is bigger than a house in many cases, most cases. It seemed like it would provide sufficient space for the people that we have in our community, which is really what we need to ensure that we're doing with the compliance with the state law. This was approved this was approved by council, but not unanimously. And our charter and our codes require 2 readings unless it's unanimous. So there will be another meeting on July 17th for a second reading of the ordinance and adoption of the ordinance. So that is, I think, sorry. So so basically this is a little hard to read and I'm sorry, but this is essentially the areas that will be prohibited for camping in the city of Stayton as approved by the council ordinance that hasn't been finalized as of yet. So all the rights of way, all the city facilities, and all of the parks in the city of Stayton.
Anything red or green.
Anything red or green, yes. So that's essentially what council did based on your recommendation and feedback from that recommendation. I was going to see, I know, Jared, you were at that meeting. I don't know if you had anything to add or share, or if anybody else from the task force had anything to add or share regarding kind of how that went and what was said.
I just think that the overall consensus was that, people are concerned about potentially pushing them towards schools or where the teen center's at. I think that we kind of mitigated that risk by changing the definitions in the code. So I think overall we're kind of on the right track right now with a lot of support. So it'll be good to get some more input from the community as well, now that they're aware that, they can come to these meetings and have their voice heard.
Thanks. Any questions or comments from the task force on the council discussion or,
Biden or people here? I have no idea about hurting. Yeah, but that was what was going to be dealt with their meeting, but it was something we should have done.
Oh, yeah. I mean, any council meeting is absolutely open to the public, so you're always invited. I will make sure. I thought that you understood. Sorry, that was sort of the next step was going to be an ordinance reflecting that phase 1. So yes, we will absolutely make sure that you have that notice when something that is coming to you guys. So you moved that forward, I thought. So that when something like that is going forward, we'll make sure that you have the date. And I think part of it, yes, you're right. I don't think you were at the last task force meeting. And so I think it was stated at the last task force meeting, but yes, I will make sure that we send information out to all of the task force members. Other questions, comments?
Is there an updated map of what the other areas are?
Not updated. I mean, we can certainly give you that. It's in the, I can show you. It's in the prior presentations that we had. So nothing has changed as far as those areas. Do you want to see them?
Yeah, that would be great to see
Okay.
what the other areas are now.
Screen sharing has stopped. Okay, so bear with me. Okay, shoot. Sorry, I need to get back and start sharing my screen again so that Jared and Ross can see this. Okay, Jared and Ross, can you see that?
Yep.
Okay. So essentially, this is there's 3 parcels on North Oak, 2 parcels on West Maple. This is probably not likely to be utilized, but there's a area, sort of an old alley. It looks like it was an old vacated alley portion, between First and Second, as well as this one. This is also this is one that will not be utilized because it's the Moose Lodge. And then there's a swath of land on East Pine. So going back, sorry, I'm all over the place, you guys. Nope. Here we go. Okay. So any other comments, perspective? So, and I do want to reiterate, and I've sort of said it throughout, but this was phase 1. This had a time sensitive piece to it, and we're kind of moving into phase 2, where we'll be able to hopefully spend more time and have more in-depth conversations and decision-making on this. So I wanted to go into, if we're done with this piece, which was just the summary of what council had done. Gosh. Oh, yeah. Yes, and wow, there's a lot more people that showed up. Actually, can somebody, Bob, can I call on you to get some chairs out? I'm sorry, because you know where they're at, or Gwen. If you're wanting to speak, there are sign-up sheets in the back. If you could fill them out and let me know, that would be wonderful. So I know how much time to leave for public comment. And we'll pause for a moment. I'm sorry that while we do this. Thank you, Adam. Sure.
Since the folks that was off, and I must turn it on with one thing, I thought that I can just set it all went up, like. As far as I turn it on, let's see.
Thank you. I just need to speak louder. I will just speak louder. I will do my best.
Is this one? This is there?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, David.
Oh, no problem.
That one too?
Yeah.
Got it.
Thank you all. I am going to speak loudly. I'm not yelling at anybody, or I'm going to try to speak loudly. Thank you very much. I don't know how to turn the volume up, so I will just speak loudly. And if we could all make sure that we're speaking to our microphones, that would be wonderful. Also for the people that are here virtually, that will be really important. So I wanted to go into, as we're entering this next phase, to share and discuss, just so you can kind of see what other jurisdictions in the area have done. This, like I said, this is a statewide thing that really every city in the state needs to evaluate and basically make sure that they are not prohibiting camping in all public spaces in their community. And so you can look at other jurisdictions. I know Roseburg was an example that was pointed out to me, but I pulled some more local locations for your comparison. And this is in your packet, and the packet is on the website if anybody wants to look at that as well, but we're going to go through it. This is a summary, but basically Jefferson they amended their code to prohibit camping in parks, including some properties identified for future development of parks, within a visual line of sight from constructed and signed recreational trails and public property, within specified city-owned facilities and grounds. And so they specifically listed those like the library, the concert house, the city hall, within public rights-of-way adjacent to or within 500 feet of a lot or parcel containing an elementary school, secondary school, daycare facility, childcare facility, or facility providing services to homeless persons. And then public rights-of-way adjacent to a lot or parcel containing a dwelling. So essentially what I gather from that is there are rights of way that are not within proximity to a school and that are not adjacent to a dwelling that they are basically choosing to not regulate. And then they did specify that camping where permitted, and I think by permitted, they mean allowed on public property, can't exceed 48 hours in one location. So that is, and then they specified that you had to move 300 feet to meet that requirement. So that's an example of a city that is choosing to regulate it or not regulate right of way in some locations. Kaiser actually similarly is choosing to not regulate right of way in some specific locations. This is, I think, based primarily on some safety issues. So they've specified in vehicular or bicycle travel lanes or within 5 feet of those, within stormwater facilities adjacent to any residential uses, within 100 feet of a school or daycare facility, within 100 feet of a church, unless that church is also providing homeless services, within 10 feet of an intersection of a street, or within 10 feet of a building entry, within 5 feet of a pedestrian path or public sidewalk. And basically they're saying that camping is prohibited except for those experiencing homelessness, and they have to relocate within 24 hours. And also specifies that individuals may not build or erect structures. Independents, from what I could tell, seem to follow kind of the path that we were initially following, which is not basically prohibiting it in all parks except for those intended for camping, rights of way. And then there were some specific parcels in town that camping would be allowed on. Almsville, they did a little bit more where they didn't at the time have anything that prohibited camping in parks. So they added the provision that camping was prohibited in parks and in all property that's within a residential zone. Essentially, from what I could tell, they are allowing it in rights of way in commercial areas. And then they did specify that it's unlawful for a person to camp or maintain a campsite on any property between the hours of 7 a.m. and 9 p.m. And then Turner, this was a little bit harder to find because they didn't have minutes out and I couldn't see a copy, or they did have minutes out, but I couldn't actually see the regulation. But based on the minutes, it looks like they specified a specific piece of property or a portion of a park in their town and had some regulations specific to behavior and length of time. So that's just an example. And I guess it's just reiterating that there are lots of ways that communities can do this. What my understanding was the direction from the task force was based on the survey responses that we heard really loudly and clearly. We don't want to allow camping in parks and that there was a concern about allowing them in rights of way. And so that's kind of why we are where we're at. But that's, there are lots of ways to do that. And I think as we go through this next phase, what I'm going to want to hear from the task force is what do we want what more do we want to explore? What more information do we want? I think now, when people were taking the survey before, they didn't necessarily have as much information as they have now. And now we have a community that's a little bit more aware of where we're at and what we're doing. And so maybe the answers would be different based on, time and more information. And so that is kind of leading into the next piece of the discussion, which is what do we do from here? Before we go into that, I guess any thoughts, comments, questions about this this comparison? Any cities that you're interested in that weren't included? There's a lot of cities that weren't included.
I like a lot of what Jefferson has defined, because it's not just no language. It's not just no, you can't be here. When some of these people, their family members live in this community, they're not going to leave. These are people that we have to make sure we're treating as if they're our own family member that's in this situation. And I mean, I like that they're clearly defining the no's as well as the yeses, because we can't just say no. There has to be an option. If we say no, we're going to end up like Boise, where they got sued because there was nowhere for these people to be. And it's just too small of a town to face that kind of situation.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I was just curious, have we said anything about the timeline for how long they are permitted to camp at this point?
Not at this point, but that is absolutely on the table. And to a certain extent, there's some policy there where you still, regardless of where you're allowed to camp, that doesn't mean that you're allowed to establish a campsite in a village. So that's more of a policy and how we enforce garbage, sanitation, those types of things. But I think it would be stronger in the long run to have some specific time provisions.
Yeah, I liked how it seemed like multiple of the cities had shall not exceed 48 hours or up to 24 hours. And then also not building any permanent type shelters. I liked that.
Any other comments or questions about the examples? And again, whether or not there's cities that you're interested in that we haven't seen. Yes, Tricia.
Thank you for the layout and kind of the synopsis of all the cities, super helpful. It would be interesting to see for this conversation and future conversations as we talk about the next phase, the comparison and maybe the cross sector between the policies and the communities and what services they offer. I'm really curious to see what the policy looks like compared to what services are either in that area directly, that community directly, or close by, and how those play off of each other and complement each other. And specifically, I'm really thinking about that in terms of the time duration. I'm not against a time. I understand this is not homelessness for all involved is not a long-term solution. Also, putting a time limit on it, you're just moving things around and it becomes a shell game unless you have those supportive services and that support that's coming along in some fashion. And that's phase 2. I understand that, but I think that they go hand in hand. So I'm just curious if we looked at that comparison.
Okay. Yeah, I'm thinking for the next meeting, because we do have a little bit more time. This is where I really want to kind of get maybe some communities that have lived it a little bit longer, some services, just to kind of get to your comment about what's helpful, what's not helpful, what are we seeing, what are we, lessons learned, if there are any. I think we're all kind of in this together, but it was, helpful for me once the deadline passed to kind of see like, oh, now we've got a lot of jurisdictions that have recently adopted stuff. So
Have you had a chance to look at Silverton?
I think I started to, but I wasn't able to find it for some reason. I'll take another look at that because I know that they do have some revisions I think that they have some specific property that they've identified and have
Yeah.
shelters, correct? Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I'd be interested in seeing what, they're doing too, being, they're kind of a similar size of town and, so.
Yeah, thank you. Any other, sorry, David, go ahead.
Yeah. I just wanted to kind of be clear on kind of what my, and I think anyone that was at the meeting, council meeting would kind of know where I'm at on some of this stuff, but I think that, I think in general, I think it's really important to know, like, as I've been thinking about this, I think that it's not really about the locations in terms of like, that we said no to those parks. I really do think that there really is a general sense of unawareness exactly where these new parcels are, right? And so really where I'm concerned is where we are allowing camping, and all of the current parcels that we are offering those on are residential areas. And one thing that stood out to me in a lot of these codes is specifically that they prohibit residential areas and near dwelling. That was a specific area of focus in those codes, and I think that's really important. The other thing that stands out to me, and as I was doing some digging afterwards, I do like the time restrictions. I think Almsville is one that is good. I saw one in Roseburg that was good. I think that the 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. restriction is good, because while we are by law required to provide a place for someone to sleep overnight, we're not by law required to provide a long-term campsite for people to stay. That's not in any of the rulings. And Ross would defer to him as well, just to get clarity on that, to make sure that I'm right on that. So I would definitely be supportive of having a time limit on the places where people can camp, and changing those locations. And I think the two spots that stand out to me, that are, none of them are actually the other city owned. I mean, some of these are in backyards of people. I mean, a lot of them, I drove by each of these parcels over the last 2 weeks and just looked exactly where they are. I mean, they're really close to people's homes and in backyards sometimes. And so I think the two parcels that stand out to me are, there is one right of way that was outside of Wilco Road. I would say this, no parcel's ideal. Like, every parcel's not going to be a great solution. So we're trying to look at for what is the least, what's the solution with the least amount of drawbacks. And there's the right of way by Wilco Road. And the other place I would like to consider would be the spot right in front of the public facility where the water treatment plant is, off of Cascade Highway. So those would be better alternatives, not perfect alternatives, better alternatives, I think, than to the other city-owned. I think the reason we haven't actually gotten the amount of pushback on these other city-owned properties is just because I don't think people fully understand yet where they're at. I think as soon as people start to understand, oh, this is actually in my neighborhood, you're going to see the same level of pushback that we saw. So I would like to see them change to some other spots, and then also see some time restrictions put in place so that we can prevent established camps from out. So I just want to make sure that would be that would be the direction I would like to move in as a task force.
Mark.
So I agree with part of what David was saying. We discussed last time setting time limits, which I think is important, and we've got some examples to discuss. Although I see your point, David, what I'm concerned about, writing something like Almsville that has a 7 to 9, are we going to have law enforcement tied up and trying to enforce that? And I don't want to write something that's not enforceable or that's tying hands. I like the idea of looking at some alternative spots. To Tricia's point that she was making, since we're getting a larger group, which I think is excellent from the public, I'm wondering if we should dedicate some time to get some information about what services are currently available, so we can really have an understanding. I don't fully understand that myself. And as citizens are here and they're having questions, we've talked all along about the importance of education along the way. And I think we should all be educated about that.
Just to respond to one comment, I I do agree that I think it does present an enforcement challenge. However, as I look at those other districts, other jurisdictions that are putting them in code, which I do think is important, just from a accountability standpoint as public, have us as the accountability from the public to be able to know, hey, this is code, is this being enforced? Many of these jurisdictions have smaller police forces, have more limited resources than our police force does. So I think that, yes, it will definitely take time for our police force, but I think the community has definitely shown that this is a very important issue that we should be dedicating significant resources to.
And I disagree with that. I think the city and the citizens are going to have to determine what resources they're willing to put towards this issue.
And I'm gonna maybe call on Chief Johns, but I'll speak and you can either say I'm completely wrong or agree with me. But I think that having more clear delineation, here's where nobody can be ever. Here's a smaller area where people can be within time constraints. I think it would be easier for enforcement to enforce a smaller area than a larger area if there's going to be time constraints. Do you agree?
When you say area, like a location area?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just going to be dependent, but yeah, I mean, the less vague stuff is going to be helpful for us in enforcement, and it's going to be prioritization, of calls for service. So if we've got a family disturbance at 7 a.m. and someone's still camping at 7:15, obviously we're going to prioritize. And if we get there at 8 and they've moved, problem solved. And if they're still there at 8, then we'll move them along. But as it is right now, they can't have an established camp. So we address that as, but we have more guidelines upon us of how long we have to notify and go back and post and all that sort of stuff. So that's what takes some time to get them moved on at this point.
Go ahead. Oh, sorry.
I think something to think about is with Jefferson's, they don't even have their own police force. And they're still writing it the way they're writing it and whatnot. So I think it definitely can be done.
Yeah, I think you can have a law, whether or not you can enforce the law if you don't have a police force to enforce it, But yeah, so I think that time will tell. Again, that's going to be an interesting kind of over this next months to kind of see what's working and what's not. Tricia.
I think it would be, thanks, an interesting conversation to talk about timelines. So there's different conversation with timelines that I see. There's the duration and hours, then there's the time during the day. I think it'd be an interesting conversation to talk about how long they could be there, whether it's, I've seen 24 hours or 72 hours, what have you. But then Almsville has it where they can't be there during the day, essentially. And that's where I can confidently say it's not best practice to have them move during the day, where they get, especially with lack of services. So think about it. Where are they going to go? Where's their stuff going to go? And if you have any hopes and dreams of solving homelessness and helping people find stability, people being our community members, our family, our friends, our neighbors, how them during the day. I don't think it's fair to ask them to pack up and move every single day. Would you pack up your house and move every morning and say, good luck, go find some place to have all your belongings and then come back and maybe have a spot? No. There's lots of reasons why that's not trauma informed or why that's not best practice. Happy to provide that. I think it would be an interesting conversation to talk about the 72 hours, 24 hours, how long could they be there? I think that is a reasonable conversation to have. But again, can confidently say it's not trauma informed or best practice to close a camp during the day, ask those community members, pack up, leave, find a place to be, especially in a rural disconnected community with no services, and then to come back and set up camp again. Bring it on.
Yeah, Mark.
Well, no, my question, Tricia, I mean, I don't disapprove of what you're saying. The moving 300 feet, I think, is to try to encourage people to not lay down roots.
Yeah.
So what are best practices as far as I think the timeline, I agree with you, is the bigger discussion. But is there benefit in requiring some movement so they don't lay down roots? Would be my question.
Best practice speaking, no, not with, especially not without services available.
But we're going to talk about
Yeah.
what services
Yeah.
are available. So.
And, well,
separating these two issues.
Yeah, I will say, I mean, I've had some conversations with Rock.
Rock?
Yeah, The Rock. And their indication was, one, you know, they want to help people get off the street. They want to help them out of addiction. They want to help them find a better life, a better solution, but they need to know where to find them. And so I think to Trisha's point, if we're saying move on when, you know, it might be better, and we'll get some information so that you guys all have a variety of information from different service providers of this is what we do. We're not in this community, but they do come to this community, or they want to, but, you know, honestly, they don't know where to find them, you know, because they're not in this community. So I think I'll just leave it there. David.
Yeah, I would just, and I think these are going to be areas where we have some disagreement, right? Like this, I don't think there's obviously different approaches. There's different philosophies. I think that helping people is very important. I think that we want to help people that want help. I think the services that people go out of their way to provide and sacrifice time to do is a really important service. But I think we're also balancing how do we best serve what I think the will of the people in the community is. And I think that they've spoken pretty strongly that we want to try to de-incentivize long-term camps in our city. And so when I'm looking at it, okay, what's going to be the best way to accomplish that? And also, I don't think that it's uncompassionate to say, you know, while you are allowed to sleep and while you're allowed to do these things, I don't think that, and I don't even think, sorry, I don't think it's uncompassionate to say there are services, and I think there are services that are pretty close by, right? Within 20 miles. And I think that there are other services that are locally. I think that the Wilco actually is the Wilco Road is actually across the street from where the food bank is. And so there are some, but there's also relatively close by services in Salem and in the community. So, and we have that list that we are providing people experiencing homelessness that the police force is providing them as well. So I would just say, I don't think that it is arduous. I don't think that we should fully direct like the decisions that we're making based on what are the best practices when it comes to like trauma-informed things. I think that we want to balance compassion with also what is, I think, been clearly stated as the will of the people in our city, and how we can best execute that while also exercising compassion. So that would be my response on that.
Go ahead.
I just want to make sure you're aware that a person that goes to the food bank can only go once per month. So what do they do for the rest of the month when that's the only resource here? That's it. There's no housing here for them. There's no shelter here. The ones that are in Salem are totally full, and they go to Women and Children First, which totally get. But it's not very compassionate to say, well, we have the food bank and that's it. That's not.
Well, I just don't think it's the city of Staten's responsibility to provide those services. I think there obviously will be I think that there are going to be nonprofits that step into some of that gap at times, but I think that we also need to be looking at how do we make best policy for our city, and also knowing that there are services that are relatively close by, even if they are at times full. And I think there are a good number of services relatively close by. And I'm not for more. I'm not for saying that, you know, you can't have services, obviously, but I just don't think it's the city's responsibility to make that the first priority as we're deciding on this issue.
And this is, first of all, this is wonderful dialogue. You're all here because you have differing points and opinions, and I appreciate that. We're just as a reminder to the task force as well as the audience that we're really talking about the camping ordinance right now, and I think as part of, and it's a good conversation about what things, right. What things are we considering? What things do we want to explore more? I think, location of services, location, there's a lot of things that we're going to be exploring over the next, the next several months. But we're not at this point in time talking about the city of Staten providing services. We're just trying to make as informed a decision as we can. Tricia and then Becky.
Yeah, so I'll make this short. So I actually agree. And I've said this before, I don't think it's the city's role and place to provide services. I firmly believe that it's not. Be partners and conduits and maybe conveners and supporters, but not the city's role. Gosh, dang it. To provide those services. 100%. I do not think it's the city's role. Supporters, yes. Friends of nonprofits and those people of goodwill coming into the community, but not the servicer itself. 100%. Going back to the survey, which was great, and I'm so happy to see and feel and hear the people behind me. 100%. We also had comments and concerns about loitering and trash and crime. That's only going to continue and possibly increase if they don't have a place to go during the day. And so we are disconnected. Another piece of the pie is transportation. Totally get that's another conversation, another service, not the city's role, but it's another factor on how to connect our friends and neighbors experiencing homelessness to these said services. But that's down the road, right? That's not an immediate fix. What we're dealing with right now is what's in front of us. And that is, where do they dwell during the day? We have to have a place for them to dwell, right? That is the law. That's what we're being charged with. I'm taking into consideration the survey, which is also the will of the people. And I believe that does include, and Ross, correct me if I'm wrong, wherever you are in the ether up there, if that includes during the day as well. But it was also very clearly stated with concerns of loitering and crime and trash and stuff. And so just think about it again, you got to pack up your stuff. Where are you going to go during the day besides roaming around town if you don't have a place to land, at least for a couple of days, while hopefully outreach teams, whether they're from here or from the Rock or where have you, are coming to make contact. It's counterintuitive to take a concentrated group, disperse them during the day, and say, good luck services in finding them or whoever, and then bringing them back. And so, again, what's in front of us, survey says also loitering, crime, and I think that's a piece of it too. So.
Yeah, and that's basically exactly what I was going to say. If we impose the not here during the day part versus giving them a time limit, you are going to have them wandering and doing what for the day? Is that going to cause issues around schools? Is that going to cause issues in residential areas? Whereas they would have a place. It just seems like kind of all of it's there. If we can locate them, we can offer them the assistance they need. They hopefully won't be causing problems in our neighborhoods, that sort of thing. So that's exactly what I was going to say.
So David and then Cassie.
Yeah, I would say I definitely am supportive of a 24-hour, 48-hour thing at the minimum. I think that's definitely better than not having any time restrictions. And generally, I think the reason I am supportive of a 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. camping ban is because I think in general it will actually just de-incentivize camping within the city limits, because it will be a hassle to set up and tear down and set up and tear down. I think that's part of it. And so I think that's really I think that would be the primary, and would end up saying, okay, there are places where there are services, and I mean, I think if there's transportation things that if it were requested that we can provide, that's fine. and obviously other things. But I think that's the reasoning behind it, is to say, I think it in general actually de-incentivizes camping within the limits.
Thanks. I'm going to go to Cassie, and then I'm going to pause and there's several of you that have spoken quite a bit. I just want to make sure that others don't have thoughts that they're just not putting their placards up for, but go ahead, Cassie.
What I was trying to get at is that would we not want to define what I was saying with yes and no language is where they can be and where they cannot be at the same time? Because if we're just saying, no, you can't be here, you can't be here, you can't be here, you can't be here, that would create more confusion rather than direction, rather than identifying the individuals that need help, where they're currently camping and where they need to move to. I think that would be our next step is defining where the no areas are as well. If the public is concerned about them being out in the public, which totally understand, absolutely, they may have concerns or not feel safe and things like that. But we have to define the areas first before we even talk about services that are non-existent.
Yeah, I mean, what's being proposed right now is really the no language, where
Right.
you can't be here, you
Right.
can't be here, you can't be here.
And that's,
Yeah, and
Right.
yeah,
If I remember it correctly, correct me, our lawyer was discouraging us from saying you can be here. The language was being discouraged of putting in the yes language, right?
Yeah, that's my recollection. And Ross is here, not Carrie. It would be interesting to see if he had a different opinion. But the idea is, if we're saying this is where you can be, then there might be some expectation of us providing services in those locations that I don't know if we're ready to do. But again, I feel like that's part of what phase 2 is about. Ross, did you have anything to share or add, or?
Yeah, I think Carrie's point on that is it's a really fine distinction. And so I'm not sure at some point, maybe in phase 3 or 4, we might get to some of that. But I guess in Julia, the examples that you gave, and there are examples from all over the state, there's basically kind of 2 camps that cities are falling in. One is what I would call positive regulation, and the other is negative regulation. And the positive is you can be here, you can be there, and you can be there. And the negative regulation is you can't be here, there, or there. The end result is, I'm not sure I can define that there's any difference between those 2 types of regulation in how they get to the end result, because the end result is there will be some place where you can sleep overnight where you will not get a citation. And I think Carrie is a little bit worried about developing a city sanctioned service area where people will go there expecting city services. I think if our regulations are clear that we are not providing services, then I'm not super worried about that. But I think given the option of positive versus negative, I think negative does away with those risks.
Thanks. So I'm going to pause and see if anybody that hasn't been speaking has anything that you're just quietly chomping at the bit to say. Go ahead. And can you make sure you speak in your microphone?
In terms of what we're doing here in the first phase, yes, we're probably going to end up like much of the other cities. And there was a lot of stuff in the Statesman Journal about some other cities too, and they were all basically a no in terms of our first go around.
Speak.
I think it's on.
Eat your microphone.
Sorry. In terms of the first go around, it's going to be fluid as time goes on. You're going to find out what works, what doesn't work. We'll find out soon in all likelihood. But if we expect any kind of positive outcome, anything that can be done, it's going to be aligned with the services that are already out there that we can somehow establish partnerships with or contracts with or something. And some kind of coordination with those services is how we're going to hopefully get to a positive outcome sometime. And being fluid with how we react and how we're proactive. is probably what's going to be a key and as it evolves.
Thank you. Kim, did you have something?
Nothing really new. Just thank you for this great dialogue. I think I'm saving everything for phase 2 with services. And just that's, that's kind of where my passion is or where my knowledge is. I think whatever we do, we've got to be respectful and support one another, though, of the decisions made. And again, I like the difference in dialogue and that you guys are doing a really great job. Just cheering you on.
And I'll also, like I said, the task force was intentionally formed with differing opinions and differing points of view, right? And I had heard that there might be some on the task force that worry that they're a scapegoat for council because of the tough, it's tough. You're making some recommendations that the public doesn't necessarily like or understand. But I think we're all doing this together. We're all, by having a room full of people sharing with a task force with diverse points of view and interests that are able to have a respectful dialogue and make a recommendation to council, who's also listening to the community. I think we're just trying to get the best product we can. And so I hope that you all know that we value your role in this, and that whatever ultimately we do as a community, we do as a community, and it's not the task force or the council, that we're doing this together. So with that, I'm going to go ahead.
Yeah. I just wanted to make a comment on just a couple of things. And I think it was connecting a little bit with what Ross said. And I think this kind of circles back a little bit to actually why I am supportive of moving more in a 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. direction. And I know it's against, I think, what some of the opinions are. And I think I respect those opinions. But I think what Ross was even mentioning is that you don't want to necessarily say, oh, if you go to this spot, you're going to get connected to services in this spot, right? Because that is actually going to incentivize people to go to that location. And so what we're looking at is the ways to de-incentivize. And I just don't think that accomplishes that same goal. I think that I think if, there are friends and neighbors, right? I think there's community members, there's people of goodwill that can connect. And obviously, but I think that we don't want to say, we don't want to say like the city of Stayton has that responsibility to provide those services. We want to help where we can, but not incentivize long-term camps or the situation to progress, right? Beyond, we want it to go the other way, right? We want to de-incentivize. So that's just what I want to say. And I understand that we may have different opinions on that, but I think that it's a little bit of why that language has been avoided by other cities, is because there is that concern to say, hey, if we say you can go to this spot, then they'll know like, hey, we're going to go to the spot and there's more access, and there's more incentive to perpetuate a lifestyle that's not actually loving and helpful for that person.
Mark.
Well, I appreciate all the citizens here, and I think it's important that they continue to come and hear the conversation, because that's how we're all going to learn together. What Ross said about writing or having the ordinance as a positive versus a negative, the term's been used incentivize or de-incentivize. I prefer the positive negative analogy. And my opinion is that governance of people should be stated clearly and not hidden in question. And I think there can be equal accountability when you're clear and when you're stating what should or what's possible. And so that's yet up for debate. And I think it's good that we hear. I'm very interested in hearing what the citizens say and what they think. And I think it's going to be important for us to listen.
Thanks. So with that in mind, I'm going to move us along. We only have 5 people who indicated they want to sign up, which in theory, okay, great. So I want to make sure we leave at least a half an hour, but yeah, go ahead. Thank you. So I'm going to move us along. And I think we've talked a bit, oh my goodness. We've got a lot. This is wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. We sort of segued into this a little bit already, at least in my mind, but sort of moving into phase two, what feedback do we need to move forward? And I think you guys have shared several ideas. First and foremost, in my mind, we as a task force, you as a task force, are sharing what you're learning and what we know and what we want to do, listening, responding, and recommending. That's kind of what you guys are doing in this next phase. We will have a booth at Summerfest, or City Hall will have a booth at Summerfest in front of, I assume in front of City Hall. We'll have a lot of city things there, so it won't just be solely task force focused, but if there are task force members that would like to be with me at that booth, I would welcome it. I will probably be there most of the day. But if we want to do a sign up sheet for task force members to be there and listen, that would be fantastic. So I'm seeing Kim nod. I'll send a sign up sheet around. Yes. And then I also want to coordinate with RDS to see about potentially getting some booths at the farmers market. That was on my list and I just hadn't done that, but I want to do that. And so if we can get some booths, I'd probably ask for volunteers to help me on there as well. We will do a survey. I'm also asking task force members to reach out. Sonia, I saw on social media, you had a very lovely detailed post, and I think that's wonderful. I really encourage you all to reach out to your community and get input and make sure people are involved. And I also just sort of am leaving any other ideas or thoughts that for this next phase of really reaching out and listening.
I think that the social media presence from the city especially would be important. Multiple posts in a week about these meetings and what is on the agenda and what input we need from the community. What I see happening on the community pages is a lot of rumors and misinformation. And it doesn't matter if we speak up and say that's incorrect. You know what I mean? It's just perpetuated. So if the city is making posts or whatever with correct information, I think that would be helpful.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Tricia.
Yeah, two things. One of our first or second meetings, we had some participation from those experiencing homelessness, which was really great. And so ways to directly get feedback and participation from those actively or recently experiencing homelessness, I think is very valuable. And then also one thing that Polk County just did. So Polk County is part of the COC, the Continuum of Care, which is the regional coordinated effort to end homelessness in Marion Polk County. But then Polk County also has their own rural coordinated group called Paths. And they're collaborative with the COC, but they have their own separate group as well. But they just had a really great listening session. And what do they call it? Do you remember, Kim? It was they called it, it was some type of symposium really, but it was a night of presentations and education and then listening session at once. And so they did a series of those, which was really great. And so a kind of a combination of hearing from providers, lived experience, and then community members listening sessions. So kind of like an educational series, going both ways, two-way communication.
Great. Other thoughts or ideas on? Okay. Oh, that's not, I don't know how to go to my next. Oh, I guess I'm there. So again, we've sort of already started this, but task force input needed for the next step, what questions need to be asked, what options need to be considered, and what additional information is needed. And I think what I am hearing is we definitely want to hear from social service agencies that provide things, even if they're not physically in Staten, that they provide services in Staten. I'm thinking, a variety of them, so you can hear a variety of points of view. People with lived experience would be great to hear from. And then also starting to have the conversation about the more detail, what other locations, do we have the right locations? Time limits, what sort of time limits? Those are the types of things that I think we need to kind of feel out over the coming months from the public. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, would it be possible to get a city map with the approved, the non-no locations, just like you had with the red and the green, with the ones that would be available marked? So then we can get a better idea how close to residential the
Yeah.
areas they are.
Yes, we can pull that together. What other information do you need or questions that we want to kind of pull out as we go forward into this next phase?
I think something that would be helpful is measurements of the areas that are going to be allowed.
Well, we absolutely can do that. That's assuming that that's where we land. Is there other information that you?
That are available.
Yeah.
Also, isn't there a requirement for how close they are to facilities,
What do you mean?
like restrooms?
No, I mean, we're not, there is no requirement that we have to ensure that they have access to facilities. We just can't get them in trouble. They can't be held accountable if we're saying the only place you can be is 2 miles from anything and don't have access to a bathroom and you're defecating.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
we want to try to prevent them defecating. And
Yes, but there's no requirement.
okay, gotcha.
Yeah. Yes, Mark.
But the idea is that if we chose some sites, we would talk about decide how to provide some work bodies and crash reception. That's part of the enforcement and accountability,
Mhm.
not just, again, take a site and it's pretty fly.
So, and based on that, I think, I guess another question that I'm hearing is, how much do we as a community do and how much do we not do, and so I think that's going to be something that maybe we want to explore over the coming months too. While we may not be required to do certain things as a community, is it better if we do certain things? And I know there's a variety of opinions.
Were part of what the survey, the community said they were concerned about defecation and budget.
Mhm.
I think that's over the question, yeah, and
Right. So this is it's been a wonderful dialogue. I think there are a lot of people that want to speak up and we've got an hour so that we can keep them to a time limit or not. We can engage in conversation or not. I'm going to kind of look at you guys and see what you want to do.
To David's earlier point about the places he recommended that may be less residential impact. I know you had it on one of the power slides. Can you bring up the Wilco Road location?
I don't think it was on the slides because it was technically a public facility,
Yeah.
but it's the lawn. It's like the lawn outside of the fenced area in front of the water treatment plant off of highway. So as you're heading into town from SIO, so that it's that one in front of outside of the fence.
And that one, I know our public works director has some significant concerns about that because of the potential water contamination risks with that, but it's, yeah.
But again, I think that's the group of citizens who weighed out, right?
Right.
It's going to have greater impact on our potential water, or is it closer to our neighborhood? And again, I know I'm stating the obvious, but I think education for citizens, as you said, that's on social media. This is a question that we have to do something. So we can't do nothing. That can't be an answer, right? So it's choosing bad choices among bad choices. Ultimately is what all cities based on the federal law and the state legislature that has changed the laws that the city has to be in compliance with all cities.
Sorry, I was having a hard time finding it, but, oh,
To answer the question you asked right before Mark started talking, I think if we have the time, I like the dialogue. And if we can let the community have some of that time to dialogue also, I think that's great.
okay. I don't have that particular, area of the right of way. I'm sorry, I will get that for you. For some reason, it's not in.
For the city, so the citizens can see what that is.
I think starting from the beginning, why are we doing
Mhm.
it? It'd be really valuable to people.
Yeah, I think we're at the point now, Julia, if we could maybe do a refresh on like a Q&A
Mhm.
type document and kind of where we're at. We've been at this
Yeah.
for a while, but there's this renewed interest or new interest, which is fantastic. But I think maybe if we can create a kind of an updated document of
Yeah.
kind of, this is where we're at. Yes, an SBAR essentially, and provide that to the community. This is where we're at. This is why we're at where we're at. And this is where we're going. And then one of the questions was what opinions need to be considered. And I've talked a little bit on that already, but if we're really looking at that area on Wilco Road, I would love to do some intentional outreach with the businesses and people around that, and not just assume they're going to be looking at whatever publications we put out, but do some intentional outreach and communication with them.
Thank you.
I think an in-depth map of those spaces, like Becky was saying, with the measurements of each space, then the distances between that space and say housing, businesses, restrooms, just an in-depth map of what we're working with, what the distances are to the different areas. Just because I think the more educated that all of us are and the more educated the community is, we'll have a better chance at finding something that'll work for everybody.
Thanks.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I just think that standard needs to be applied exactly kind of what Adam was saying. I think that standard needs to be applied across. So I think if we're talking to business owners, which I think is good, we also need to be knocking on the doors of the people that we're saying, right behind your house is where they're going to be. So I think that having that community input is really important and valuable. So I just think being as transparent as we can, this whole process, and allowing that input of as well. And to your point on, I think somebody mentioned about, no, it's all right. It's good.
Okay. Adam, did you have another question or you still have your placard up? All right. So before we go to public comment, Jared, did you have anything to add? You're remote, so I want to not forget about you.
No, I don't have anything to, I think it was all pretty summed up pretty good.
Okay. Oh, Ross, did you have anything to add or say?
No, I don't think so. I maybe I'll just reiterate what Julia's been saying all along, and that this we're really seeking input from you all to help make these policy decisions, and we will draft the code when you give us those directions. And so this is a really hard process. You're making really tough choices. And I think it's been said by a couple different people, we're trying to make the least bad choice or the best choice among bad alternatives. So I just encourage you to keep this dialogue going. I think you're doing a great job.
Okay, we have 50 minutes to talk with folks. The first one, so I'm going from the bottom of the list because that's who turned their thing in first. So that's why I'm doing this. So B. Anderson. And then I've got to figure out where we want you to be, where you can be heard.
Microphone maybe by Ben.
Perfect.
Hi, everybody. And obviously you already know my name, so I don't have.
Is your microphone on? I'm not hearing you super loudly.
Oh, I guess I got it.
Oh, perfect. Yeah.
Hi. Okay, I have a couple of questions. The first one is I live on Woodcock Avenue. My property butts up against the middle school's field in the back. It's wonderful. I love it. There's part of my community is questioning what is going to be happening with the properties. The first thing that we were going to end up asking you is that the tree property, I don't know what it's called, high 40s or whatever, back 40. Okay. That property is the school district's property. How come the city of Staten is saying that that's exempt when it's the school's property instead? I think you need to communicate maybe with the school district to find out about what's going on with that property, what is going to be happening with that property, if it's going to be exempt or not, because it's not a designated park. It's just the school districts. So
I think I can answer that. Should I?
You
Or do you
can
want
go
to?
ahead.
That's not the park facility that was being referred to.
is it the Mill Creek Park? that
Yes.
It's right next to
That's
it.
next to it.
Yes.
So we
okay.
weren't
That's
talking
gonna
about
be-
back 40.
Okay, so
Yeah.
the back 40 was exempt. Thank you.
Yes.
The other one.
Beef, just a moment. If I can just get Ross to chime in on the school component, so it is a public property. And I guess I just want to make sure that, that we all understand. So we're regulating city property, public spaces that the city controls. My understanding is that it is up to other public entities to do the same if they so choose. Can you chime in on that, Ross?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I'll just repeat what you said, Julia. It's the statute that we're trying to come into compliance governs us as a city and the regulations that the city has over its own property. The school district, to some extent, has to comply with that same law, but there's no overriding obligation that they provide open space and allow people onto their own property. So they can regulate their property and say, for school use only, or open during school hours only for school attendance, things like that.
Thank you. Go ahead, B.
Okay, and the other questions that they were having too was that with the school property, there is a site that is the city of Staten's that is at 2400 Kendall Way. It's 12.23 acres and it is the city's. And that is just south of the teen center property. And we were concerned about that to see if that was going to be included with any of these additional properties. It's not a park, it's part of the cities, but we needed to find out if indeed that was going to be included in this conversation as far as the homelessness is concerned.
So I'm pretty sure that is a facility. I'm just pulling that up.
Sure.
Yes.
It's map number 091. Okay.
So if you, this is hard to see, I admit that. So this area here, this green, that is Mill Creek Park. The area south of that is red, and that's a city facility. It's a water treatment facility. So that would not be, that would be prohibited from camping.
Okay. So that would not be included then.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, and then lastly, because they were real concerned with that. Lastly, I know that we need to end up finding a solution for this. It's not just the negativity is like everybody was saying, we've got to end up being positive. Okay, there is a problem. We need to end up solving it. And it's not for just the people now, it's for the future, it's for our kids, it's for the homeowners in Staten. We just need to find a solution, and it is going to take time. I already know that. And yes, I am going to be here the duration too. The, one of the other questions that they had and that came up too is with all of this, once that it's all been established, is this going to be put to a vote on a ballot? Or is this going to be something that the council is just going to vote on instead of just the public?
So as envisioned and as most cities are doing, it would be a vote of the council via ordinance. So they would be establishing the rules in the code via ordinance. That doesn't mean to say that they couldn't put it to the voters, but it would have to be carefully.
It'd have to
done.
be worded. Yeah,
Yeah.
it'd have to be worded specifically. Okay. That is all that I have. Thank you very much for listening to me.
I think ordinance is one thing, and what I heard and
You make sure that you're speaking into your microphone. Sorry.
what the ordinance is, the language the city
Right.
council is approving.
The
What's
1063.
going to be important, and Stephen brought this point up earlier in conversation, what the city policy is can be, I think, needs to remain fluid so that we can be reactive and make changes if something isn't going right and not be locked in on an ordinance, right? So my concern is to get too wordy with the ordinance. I'd rather have the room for the city and the citizens to weigh in on adjusting policy and how that was going to be carried out.
And just to be clear, ordinances can change. Ordinances change all the time. And so we are almost done with the phase one ordinance that will be what it will be. And we are immediately working on what we're going to do to fix it because we know it's not perfect. And it will not be perfect even
so-
when we fix it.
So that's the 1063 that was just passed.
Yes, it was passed, but it's going to be adopted again because of, because of the
Oh, the
wording,
wording.
because it
Okay.
requires two readings. Yes,
17th of July. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
yes.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much for your time.
Next up is Justin Agui. Can you pronounce your last name? Oh, I would not have.
AGUINAGA. Is this like city council where I get my address and all that?
You don't have to.
Sweet. So one thing about designating, my two thoughts of designating a spot or a zone is when I was in the Marine Corps, we had a saying, a bored Marine is a dangerous Marine. You take all these people that are having issues of homeless displacement. I don't know all the fancy terms or PC terms for it, but waiting on services to come, waiting on their angel to come to save them. And in the meantime, they got nothing to do. They don't have a bathroom to use. They don't have running water to use. They don't have anything. Honestly, I think that's a good idea. Don't let them plant roots. Keep them moving. Keep them at. So the last city council meeting we had, whole room was full of people. Everyone left. And then the city argued for probably seemed like another 45 minutes about road fee of $8 or $4 or something like that. And that's to fix the roads. The average porta potty in Portland is $500 to $550 a month to maintain. And we're nickeling and diming for fixing our roads. Again, I think phase two, I'm learning a lot tonight. I wasn't here before. So I didn't realize there's how many phases are there?
Well, hopefully only two.
Okay. So
And we're not, like, both of us are not affiliated. We are not members of city council.
only these two.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't see you last meeting. All right. No, sorry, I cut her off by a little bit.
Both of us are not part of that.
Yeah.
What we're just here to do is make a recommendation for the
Yeah.
last of what needs to occur in the code.
And I really liked how, I think it was you two that were talking about outside services of coming in. Do we have a ball rolling on that? Of those services being notified about, yes, we have homeless now?
Yes.
Yes.
How often do
So-
they come in?
I was gonna say our sit team, Kim. Yeah,
I coordinate the service integration.
Okay.
Sorry, I coordinate the service integration team, and while everyone was talking, I was making some notes in case I was asked this question.
Awesome. You're welcome.
So we've got the food bank Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 12. Once a month, they will supply a supplemental box, but it's much smaller.
Okay.
The mental health van from Marion County does come to Anthony Hall, which is Sublimity, 2 times a month, Wednesday from 9 to noon on the second and fourth Wednesday. Arches comes once a month, which they do housing assessments for the unsheltered population. They come once a month, and that's the third Thursday at 9. So we don't have much, but we're working on it.
So we're going to create
And I will say there's more programs available and that are interested and hungry to come out. But there has to be that partnership. And so that's where I say I'm eager for the city and the community to partner. I'll say it again. It's not the city's job to operate these services. But there's lots of funding to be available. And PS, whoever told on me last time, I figured it out. And whoever told me with Danielle Bethel, she called me the next day. I'm not afraid of it. Which is totally fine. Separate conversation. There is funding available for things like porta potties and dumpsters and stuff like that and services. There's more services that are interested in coming in, but there needs to be that partnership and help in locating and working together.
Okay. So we create the zone. They can see someone 5 times a month-ish. Between, you said mental health twice a month, food box twice a month max with supplemental. Just seems like we're going to create issues more at home. And seems like every time I drive by the Arches building, especially when it was at the old location, it looked like a homeless camp itself. So we're reaching out saying, cool, the Arches program will come out and help. They can't even help themselves. And is there going to be an accountability of having sex offenders in these homeless camps? Because then you're putting the burden on state and PD about extra patrols. Are they going to patrol the area a little bit heavier, knowing that hypothetically the crime rate's going to go up in the area? And that's something that I have no leg in the fight for, because it's the council and the city, and I don't even want to touch their budget, that nightmare. So it's one of those things that I'm not big, like I said, keep it moving, keep it uncomfortable. And I understand have a spot where services can come out. Cool. But when 95% of the time they're got idle hands, are we going to play games with them? Like, nothing good's going to come out of it. And so, yeah, that's why I'm a big proponent about not letting them grow roots, like Julio said. So yeah, my little 2 cents.
I feel like this might be a good opportunity to say that as a city, we cannot, if we say no camping allowed, we have to provide a shelter. That's what the state has put on the cities. That's what started this entire task force to begin with. So we don't, if we want to put the money into an actual shelter, we can go that route.
Is it a shelter or?
We have to provide, they have a basic human right to live.
To sleep.
Doesn't have to be dry.
Doesn't have to be dry?
Well, so
Go ahead.
we cannot prohibit people from being safe, warm, dry, sleeping. And if we were to prohibit it everywhere in the city, we could only do that if there was a place that they could unequivocally be safe, warm, and dry within our community. And so that's where I think what Becky is saying
Yeah.
is essentially a
So our
shelter.
lawyer had advised us in the beginning that if we say no camping, we actually have to provide those services in a different way for them to have their basic right to live, to sleep. None, if we've said none. So it's not,
Okay.
really an option. It is kind of how we, as a task force, took that. The city of Staten had to make a choice. That is why the task force was created, to try to get the community's input to figure out where or how we wanted to deal with this situation. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I didn't realize that
Mhm.
if we say you can't camp here, oh, we have to build a shelter now. And is that falling
and
on the
just-
city's budget?
No,
And just to be clear, it doesn't
a
say
shelter,
that you have, I mean, it's very complicated, but if we say you can't camp here, we can say that, and we are saying that.
Yes.
We just can't say you can't camp anywhere. And if we say you can't camp anywhere, then we're in violation of the state law unless there is another place within the community that people can be.
and
so
that other
that's what we're-
place does not have to be city run or operated. It could be run by a church, any nonprofit, any group could come in and open up a 24-hour warming shelter with very basic services. And if that is stable and consistent, then the city could say no camping anywhere at any time, because that service would be available, even though it's not city run. But right now we don't have that, so we don't have that option.
But
And-
we do have the option of saying, hey, time limits and hey, you
Yes.
you need to pack up, clean up.
Yes.
And I like that
Absolutely.
idea of not growing roots. So if volunteers or anyone can walk by and be like, yep, it's all cleaned up for the day. See you tomorrow night. Something like that, where, like I said, they're not growing root. Go for it.
I'm gonna say, this was my life. So I will say the best outreach team, hands down, the best outreach team is a nonprofit volunteer group called Be Bold. They will outperform and they have higher outcomes than Arches and any other program in
Local.
they are, and they actually go up to up through the canyon. They go over to Eastern Oregon quite a bit.
Okay.
Look them up, Be Bold, and it's volunteer run. They have, I think, 2 staff members and their rest is volunteers. And they're fantastic and by far the most effective outreach team. Be Bold Ministries on Facebook.
Okay.
So,
I will say, just on Be Bold, I do love Be Bold. Be Bold's fantastic. Matt and Josh are just like the Be Bold Street Ministry. They do a fantastic job. I think of addressing a lot of the root like issues in terms of that character change and helping people find purpose and all that stuff. So I think I do think that there are people like that are great to partner with at times.
No, that's awesome to hear because that's awesome because it's great. Mental health is coming to Sublimity twice a month, but Oregon rates 50 out of 50 on mental health. So, I mean, yay, way to bring that check mark when it's really not a check mark. But yeah, I'll take. anyone
So,
else?
yeah, so we do have a lot more people to hear from, but this is a good dialogue. It's good. No, yeah, the more people ask questions and the more we're able to explain, that's great. So, Mark, did you have a comment?
Go for it.
So, as a citizen, also, I'm concerned that we handle this correctly, so we don't put, and the attorney talked about this from the very beginning, city and litigation where we have tie up a lot of resources spent in court trying to defend the ordinance. And so doing that as smartly as we can and looking ahead and trying to be smart that way. Because you can save a lot of money that way too, for the road by not getting caught out in court.
Yeah. Because I think there is a couple cities that are saying, cool, we got 90 days before them to file a complaint and going that route. And I think Dallas might be one of them. Or maybe they changed their opinion last minute. But all right.
Thank
I'm
you.
gonna stop.
Thank you. Next up is Deb Glandy. Deb.
Yeah, my name is Deb Glander. I'm a lifelong resident of Staten, and I'm back in my childhood home at 413 North Fifth. I have several questions, and you guys can answer it later or as we go. I never have heard how many homeless people we have in Staten now. And living down by Pioneer Park, I'm very aware of the ones that come and go there. My other question is, how many locations?
Can
do
you speak up? I'm sorry, we're
I'm sorry.
people, that's
I thought
okay.
it was right close there. How many locations are you thinking about really providing? Because I think about our police department and them not being spread too thin. I mean, you know, we need them for our other emergency calls. So, and I love the idea of the social media coming straight from the city. I think that's very good because I have seen so much erroneous information on Facebook. So thank you for mentioning that. I'm concerned about, I do agree that we need to have some services, but once again, like at the city council meeting, they said, if you build it, they will come. I'm concerned about an influx of more people coming. And there was one fellow who wasn't even a resident here in Staten, but he gave some talk about his exposure to the homeless in a bigger city where they were lighting the porta potties on fire. So, you know, I mean, you've got lots of issues there. And the part about having access to restrooms, the city parks, the restrooms have been locked. I've been down at the Pioneer Park and there was a homeless guy and he was wandering around. He wanted to use the restroom. There was nothing for him to use. So it's kind of a oxymoron that we're saying we need to provide it, but we're not providing it because they damage what we've already got. So there's got to be a way to restrict it, and it's going to be a real hard road to haul. I wanted to know, as far as, I know you're not going to talk about the services now, but you talk about that there is funding. Okay, is it funding coming out of our city budget? Are you going to be looking to the taxpayers to increase our taxes that we already pay for parks and services? So that's a concern for a lot of citizens, I think, because there's a lot of retired people that are on limited income. And so that's kind of all my questions, but I appreciate all you're doing and I'll stay in touch. So thank you.
I can answer some of those questions. I don't know that I got them all. I'm sorry. I was sort of talking with someone for a second, but as far as how many homeless, there's what's called a point in time count that's done nationwide that basically counts on one day or within 1 week every year. And based on that, there are 13. Sorry, did I get it wrong?
I had 10 come in.
Oh, 10. Okay.
So we hold it the last week of January and I'm always looking for volunteers. We have it right here in the community center. And so we had 10 individuals come in and take the survey. But that's just 10. I know there's probably more than that here.
Yeah. So there are about 10, obviously it's flexible depending on the time of year. As far as parcels, the unregulated parcels, there's about 8, I believe. I might be counting the Moose Lodge in that, but I'm not 100% certain. So there's a handful of small parcels that would be unregulated. Again, that we're not saying go here. We're just saying we're not going to kick you off if you're there. So I just really want to stress that. And then as far as funding, I think the funding that's available is not, certainly the city has spent money through law enforcement and parks cleanup and parks maintenance. We have spent money on addressing homelessness. And that does come out of the general fund. As far as what I think Tricia was referring to as funding available, there could be some county funding or state funding potentially that we would need to explore. I don't know were there other questions that you guys want to chime in on?
Well, my main concern is that if you're looking at 8 different parcels, our police department is spread pretty thin as it is. And I hate to see, I hope that you consider that we're
right now they're anywhere.
I know.
That's the challenge. Right now, there is no regulation in terms of where they can be.
Right. But I hope you consider the fact that you're not going to have all 8 parcels being an option for them, because I think that's too much to ask, and too much to ask of the community too. So thank you. Thanks for the information.
Thank you. Eric Stelzer.
Well, I don't have very many questions. I got your name, Kim, from Ed Deal. So by listening, I know that I'll be talking with you in the future here. One of the people, I'm originally from Corvallis, and I worked with the homeless at the men's warming shelter through Rotary. And I got some folks off the street and into housing, into senior facilities that were living in doorways. And one of the people that I work with is a gentleman by the name of Ty Poss at Community Outreach. And their facility and their organization is very, very successful in helping those that want to help themselves, And I want to be part of that. And I have a meeting with him on Wednesday to gain some insight. His question was, what are we doing to empower the unhoused populations? With regards to what you're doing here, deciding campsites and shelters, I have to leave that up to you and the city because I don't know how to establish that. I do know this. There are areas where the homeless can go, and there's all kinds of services available in Corvallis to help people, yet they have a serious problem there. And across the river, you have murder happening. I just found out today that over by the river and the bridge, there was a woman that gave birth to a small child in a field and deposited that child in a bucket of feces. Is that what we want? In Staten, we have a population, I understand, upwards of maybe 35 homeless compared to these really, really large numbers when it starts getting out of hand. So it's going to take a coordinated effort to deal with the homeless. And I kind of look at it in three parts. If you have to provide big shelter, that's a lot of money expended that you don't really have to do. But if you don't say that you have no camping, but we do have camping here, you can satisfy that requirement. I would like to know how to get involved with an advocacy group or area in Staten where the people who, by chance, those people that have their hands up and want to get helped can get the necessary help. We don't want to leave all this to the police to do all that. Need community involvement, and that's where I'm going to try to get involved. So they have resources available to them in Salem and such. But then there also needs to be, I believe, some tough love for the people that don't want to help themselves. If they're committing crimes, I want them to be held to the same consequences I would be. Jail them, get them out. You know, you go to Staten, boy, they really help you over there. But gee, if you don't follow the rules, you don't want to go there. Okay, move on down the road. That's not being done in a lot of places. And now they have a growing issue. But the one thing I do get a lot of enjoyment or satisfaction out of, maybe it's selfish, is the few people that I have helped get back on their feet, move on, and get a job was something I wanted to do. And I can help network other people to do that. That's really all I have to say. And now try to speak with you later. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bill Jepson. Oh,
Well, I just want to say thank you for your words. One thing that we've talked about in our conversations is compassionate accountability. We've had some really great dialogue on just that, on how do we help and support, but have that accountability. Like everyone, it's the same rules and regulations for everyone. No one gets a free pass. And how do we do that with compassion, but have the same standards for everyone? So I really appreciate those words. We've had some great dialogue on that.
thank you. Bill.
Yeah.
Bill Jepson.
A lot of it's already been mentioned. My number one concern is children. I haven't heard enough about that from this group, about schools and where to keep these people or these houseless people. I've had an incident at my place, well, at the neighbor's house with a houseless person who we held at gunpoint in our garage because he broke into the house. He was in their car. They get bored during the day. They get bored during the night. I like the time constraints that you talked. You don't let them plant roots. Maybe they need to go to work from 7 a.m. till 4:30 in the afternoon. I know the services, we don't have that here. Try to find them some kind of job. I think that's a good point, but number one concern is children. I drive 45,000 miles a year. Probably 38,000 of those miles are in Portland, where they've welcomed homeless people, where they've given them things. We don't want to give them things. If we do, they need to earn it. So it's not a handout. They will move here. I think Portland's in the process of kicking them all out right now. Come to state in Oregon, because we'll give you what Portland's not anymore. It's not what we want to do. So that's all. I know there's others.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Debbie Radish.
I just wanted, a lot of it's like the people before me have said, been said already. But one of my questions is if we give an area, which we apparently have to do because that's the law, to camp, I am in full agreement of the time restraints. They're going to roam around during the day anyway, so no, they're not going to stay in one place. And if they do come to Staten, is that the only place they can go? What about the ones who choose to go other places and camp out? What are you going to do with them? Are you going to make them go to the one facility or the one piece of property? And it's a lot of, I'm a little nervous talking, so my mind's kind of rambling. Sorry. So I worry about the facilities. There's no facilities. People have talked before about the gentleman who said, you know, they burn the porta potties, they burn whatever you provide for them, they destroy. So what is humane? What is the humane treatment for these people that are homeless? It's a tough call. If they want to help themselves, then there's the facilities and the services that they can help themselves. Some of them cannot seem to get to that point. And whose responsibility is it to try to make them get to that point? So those are all things we have to think about. The crime that might be coming, which it usually comes hand in hand, the stress on our firefighters, our police officers, everything is impacted here. So making a place for them seems the solution, in my opinion. Other people have their own opinions. And a time constraint. You can stay here, you can sleep here, and then you need to move on. They don't need to plant roots, because if you give more and more, they take and take and take and don't try to better themselves.
That's what I have to say. Thanks. Derek Bishop.
Yeah, it's Derek. And hi, how are you? So yeah, again, some of the things that are being said are great comments and good points. We kind of wonder how we got ourselves in this position, right? So the legislature / laws, lawsuits, and have got us a little bit scared. And I think the governor's on board with pushing this out. But why, right? Why do the big cities not want these folks? Well, it's probably, in my opinion, at least, is it's hard to deal with. It's a never ending problem, right? So we have different people from different generations, and some of this is generational. I had a job not unlike yours, ma'am, where I dealt with this all the time. It wasn't easy. And most of it, unfortunately, the folks wanted to be that way, whether it was mental illness or was the drugs or a combination. Is the job that I did, sometimes for as long as I did, I couldn't tell the difference after a while, whether it was really a mental illness or was a combination of drugs and alcohol that got him to the mental illness, or it was a very blurred area. So now smaller towns are having to deal with this. And I do not envy you guys, because being on a task force to try to figure this out is rough. All I could say is I would agree personally with some pretty strict timelines on how long people can stay. Because once they start setting up routes and taking grocery carts, and you got 6 or 7 of those with all their belongings in them, and then they create a little mini house, if you want, That's not something, as you said earlier, can be moved quickly or easily. I don't know if I would agree with telling them, okay, you need to go during the day. The problem with that is you're right. They can't move that stuff and they don't want to. And if they do, they're going to leave a lot of junk behind that they don't want. And then we're going to deal with that. So we have lots of issues. And then we have the issues about how the police department can actually enforce this stuff. So we have to be really careful and walk the legal lines along with the attorney for the city and maybe, DOJ looking at some different laws that say, can we really enforce this one? Can we really say it's temporary 48 to 72 hours? That's a tough one. And ma'am, how many police officers do you typically have per shift?
So we're 13 sworn that covers 24 hours.
Right. Right. So how many police officers would you send to a disturbance at 2 a.m. at one of these places? One? No, you wouldn't, would you? You wouldn't want to do that, would you? I'd get out of bed to come help you because it's just not safe. You'd send probably 2 or 3 if you could.
Correct.
And guess how many that is of that shift? Probably everybody. So guess what happens when there's another emergency in another part of town? So it's a dilemma. I'm not telling you how to fix this. I'm just saying once we do this, and it sounds like we don't really have a choice of doing this, I would be real careful about keeping the rules, enforceable by law enforcement, able to hold up to lawsuits, and then, try to keep these folks here as short term as possible. Because the reality of it is state and Oregon is not ready to sustain a large population of homeless. And somebody threw a number around of maybe 35, right? And I don't know. I go for a walk down at the river. We're talking about Mill Creek Park, or what is that called?
Riverfront Park.
Riverfront Park, right down in there. Okay, they're in there. I go sometimes at sunset. They're in there just kind of acting like they should be there, but they're not. And you can tell they got their bicycles and different things and some of their belongings, and it's awkward. And I don't feel safe for me or my wife walking in there sometimes too. So, I don't feel comfortable. And then they don't want to look at me. And, and I don't know that that's a good place either, because then it excludes the public from wanting to or feeling comfortable walking down there. So we do have a lot of issues with where they go. I would say I wouldn't do 8 places. I would do a couple. If we only got 35 people, I don't know how big these lots are, if they're a half acre to an acre. If you could get, how many people could get a tent in there? Quite a few, but I would restrict it to less than 3. So it's something that the police can actually get to. If we have 2 disturbances in 2 different spots, guess what? Now we have 3 police officers. And now what are we going to do? Now we're in trouble. We're calling Marion County, or we're calling the state police for help. Maybe Lynn County maybe they're at the north end of their district and they can jump and help, but I wouldn't want to count on that. Because I've dealt with these folks before. Some of them are great and some of them you just can't reach. The gentleman over here talked about some of the people he was able to help. God bless you for that. We love that. And I want these people to get help. I have a degree in psychology, and I dealt with these folks over the years. It's tough. Some of them just don't want help. Some of them just love that lifestyle. But there are some that want help, and we want to get those services to come out and help those folks. But maybe we can get somebody with services that can help transport them to the real places that can give them service too, And I know Salem's busy. Maybe Albany can help once in a while. I don't think we could get as far as Corvallis, and I don't think Silverton has much either. But at least that may be an option for transportation. Like, okay, you've been here 72 hours. We've got a group of people that are willing to come in a van and get you to where you need to be because our rules state this. And we don't want you to get in trouble, So these are some of the things and one other scary thing I want to tell you at the very end of my talk, because I know there's other people want to talk, is, and this has been said before, if we make it too comfortable, they will stay. And we do not have the services. And it is a disservice to them as well as it is to us if they come to a place that we just can't help them. Once we make it comfortable and they're getting their health care, they're getting meals coming in, and they're getting help, but they can only stay 72 hours. Well, what if they stay longer? And they're nice people, and we kind of we want to help them. So they stay a little longer, right? And the community doesn't want them to get hurt. We don't want to shove them out the door because they can't find anything else. Well, that happens, and it happens several times in a row. And all of a sudden we have a community of people out here that we just can't really help. And from what I did before, I noticed that other cities will ship you their homeless. Other cities, other states. And they do that. And I ran into that a lot. And I said, where are you from? Oh, I'm from Wyoming, or I'm from Colorado, or I'm from wherever. And I just would ask, well, how'd you get here? Oh, well, I got a bus ticket. Well, who gave it to you? The city of whatever. Why? Well, they told me that Oregon is this, and they got free healthcare, and then you can get food and you can get services. And you know what? And he shows me his card. He's got it. So where do we do then? So I'll leave you with that. Good luck.
So, yeah. Can I just make a quick comment on what are you saying? I agree with a lot of what you were saying. I think it's really important to just remember we're not responsible. Staten's not responsible for the state's failures, right? Like we're 50th in mental health, right? We're doing a lot of things that incentivize people to send the homeless here, right? And so it's like to make Staten responsible for the state's failures, especially when it comes to the mental health. That's the heartbreaking thing. Like the heartbreaking thing is that there are people that want to get help, right? We should help those people who want to get help. Absolutely. But then there are people who are actually kind of incapable of even receiving help. Like they kind of move beyond, and it's the state's failure in the mental health arena to be able to actually address that issue. Like in Sydney, I was talking to a friend in Sydney, Australia, and they actually have facilities where people are sent once you reach a certain point of being a danger to yourself and others, and they actually have ways to actually enforce that. So I'm not saying obviously we can't change state law, but Staten should not bear the full weight of that. So whatever we can do to be able to help those obviously who want help, but also not to incentivize and make Staten responsible for the overall state's failures.
Thanks. All right, Chad Hallmeyer.
How's it going? Yeah, well, kind of what BJ said, a lot of it's already been spoken about. Just been taking some notes during this stuff. So, we're kind of used to kind of state overreach forcing things on us. COVID was the biggest thing, right? There wasn't that much teeth in the end, right? It's right in front of me here. All right. So like I said, the state's overreach on things, it's time and time again. COVID was a good example. Like I said, there wasn't much teeth in it. When it came to the end, you do this or you're going to get sued, you do this, you're going to go to jail, do this, we're going to take this, that. Very little would ever happen. So this is the same kind of situation, right? So if we're looking at it, like redefining it, it's not camping. They're not camping. Like the definition of camping is the activity of spending a vacation, living in a camp, tent, or camper. Where are they taking a vacation from? Like that's not the scenario, right? Like we need to address it for what it is. It's squatting. It's loitering. It's something different. If we could just look at the way we write this ordinance, where it's not addressing as camping and can be held accountable for it, we can combat them from ever even coming in city limits. But that's the approach I think we need to be taking, not it's on top of us. We got to do something with it. You open the doors, like there's no amount of money that's going to be able to take care of this problem. Like none. Portland's tried, Salem's tried, they've all failed. It's ballooned up and now it's overflowing at us, right? Like what you said. The state's failures are now falling on us as a burden, right? And then like on the time limit thing, what's kind of a fault of the time, 24 hours, 48, 72, right? One, how did they get here? And then how are we going to get them out of here after that time is up? I mean, or do we got a taxi service? Is somebody paying for bus tickets? Is the police department going to be taking them to the next town? I mean, we're 8 miles away from like the nearest town of Almsville or whatever, right? Are they going to walk that? Okay, then we got a traffic problem. We got people pushing carts or bikes or whatever down the road that are going to get ran over. There's all kinds of problems. And I think the approach is just wrong of trying to mitigate and find a location for these people. We just need to keep them out of city limits.
Do you want me to? So again, it's state law as well as Ninth Circuit Court decision that basically says that you cannot prohibit somebody experiencing homelessness from basically doing the things that are required to live, which is staying warm, staying dry, eating or sleeping. And so, yeah, so we call it camping because that's sort of we're not regulating recreation. We're regulating human existence who don't have shelters. So, you know, I heard what you were saying. I just want to make that clear that we can't prohibit people from having a place within the community to exist. And it's not just Stayton, it's everywhere in the state. And frankly, it's everywhere in the Ninth Circuit area. So it is a West Coast issue because it has not been heard by the Supreme Court. Ross, do you have anything to add to that? I'm testing your attentiveness to this meeting by throwing you it. Thanks.
No, Julie, you, as always, are capturing it very succinctly. I think that was great.
Thanks.
Could I add one thing?
Yeah.
I do think seems to be the case, right? You can't prevent someone from keeping warm and dry. There are cities like Roseburg that do really define in what camping is and really limit, like, someone was talking about structures and starting to build, like, I think there are real ways that you can limit, like we're not required to allow them to build structures, not allowed. There's just you can really hone in what that definition is. And I think that will also help de-incentivize, although in principle, I definitely agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. And through this effort, the task force will be working on that to be more clear and specific in regards to what is regulated and how. Becky, you look like you have something to say.
I do. I just want to say thank you again to everybody. And it's not that we don't disagree with what Chad just said, that I think as a community, we would rather not have to deal with this at all. But it's here and we have to. And in our community, out of the homeless individuals are those experiencing homelessness. I've learned that. We've heard about one that's been here for 30 years and has no desire to become unhomeless. We've heard about people living in their car because they just can't afford rent. They have jobs, but rents are so astronomical that they have no other choice. We obviously have some mentally ill or addicted to drugs. We have a wide variety. Unfortunately, we have to make a decision for a very varied population all in one setting or saying one thing. Does that make sense?
It does. And I'd say like most community probably isn't worried about the ones that are like, they can't afford rent. I got to stay in my car with my kids for a while, Those people, you make a few phone calls and somebody in the community will take them in or find a place to like house them temporarily until they're back on their feet, right? The dude that's been for 30 years, power to him, he's figured it out, right? What we're worried about are the drug addicts, the mentally ill ones, stuff like that. Maybe it's something in our verbiage or our ordinance. Like if you got so many misdemeanors, if you got a felony, like, no, like you're just not welcome, regardless of what the situation is, right? I mean, find something like that to keep that kind out and at bay.
I would like to add to, excuse me, that the police force have told us that they will give rides into shelters. They have done that if they have the ability to do so. And I can let Chief Johnson.
Yeah, and I've said it at previous meetings, but there's a new audience here. Our approach obviously is not just let's fix it right now, Band-Aid, move on. We want to help to work, find a solution. So we had one gal in town, clearly had mental health issues, wanted to live, not within a shelter because of some of the conditions she was challenged with. It took a lot of effort from a lot of different people to finally get her some help. And she's now housed, which is something she's finding she's enjoying and wanting. But it was significant years. Yes. And it was a process, and it was mental health. It was the fire department. It was the police department. The day that we got her the assistance she needed, it was a team of about 12 of us out at Pioneer Park and her family. So a lot of different resources that came together. And, she wasn't a problem necessarily to us. The citizens, didn't know what she was probably capable of, and she did appear scary, and we understand that. But we've had a lot of different situations that we try to process through. Obviously, safety is a big concern, and we've always addressed the behavior. So currently, it sits that if we have someone in a park, right, that's littering or defecating, we can do a 30-day exclusion, and that's what we focus on. We can't say, I don't like how you look, or I don't like, that you may be homeless. I don't know if the guy sitting out throwing a Frisbee is homeless or not. He's enjoying the park, right? Or the guy in the sleeping bag, is he homeless, or that's just how he's enjoying the park? But behavior we can address. So you're creating a disturbance. You're doing something that's against an ordinance or a law. But at the same time, we've driven people to Albany for shelter. We've driven people to Salem, and not necessarily to displace the problem, right? It's not the free bus ticket to somewhere else to be somewhere else's problem, but to get them to a resource that they want to go to. But a lot of this is things that they want to. We can't kidnap someone and take them someplace they don't want to be. But yes, we have to live within the rules and laws that are provided to us, and yet work to keep the community safe. And, we do that through a lot of things. We collaborate with SIT. We've had situations where we need someone wheelchair, and SIT was able to do that. Where we can, we collaborate on resources to get help and look for that long-term solution as well.
Is there a way to drug test them? No. Shot in the dark.
No. And I will say too, sometimes it's perceptions, several times I'm chief, but I go out on calls. And we've had calls where someone's smoking meth in the park and they're vaping, so sometimes it's a perception issue. No, it's not super pleasant to see someone, with this big cloud of smoke around them when, but we have to deal with what we can prove and what's outside of ordinance or outside of law when we're dealing with stuff.
All right. Thanks, guys.
So we've got one more person signed up to speak, and then I received some comments that I'll read as well. So Miguel Vilas. And can you spell your last name so I can make sure that I add you?
As Victor, A-L-L-E-S.
Yes.
Good evening, everybody. Want to thank you guys for forming this task force here. My name is Miguel Valles. I'm a new resident here in Oceanside in Staten, Oregon here. My wife and I, we bought a home right here, a new home, just next to the middle school. One of the things that I came from a town in California where I retired, in Oceanside, California. I wasn't going to say the city, but anyways, we had that same problem out there, and it grew and it grew and it grew. We had homeless camping out across the street from our house. We had homeless living in the baseball parks, city parks, everywhere. There was trash everywhere. There was drug paraphernalia everywhere. Kids going over to play Little League. Some of the parents would have to go through and, backtrack in the areas of where these people were at. Trash everywhere. Impacted the city tremendously. Not only the city workers, parks workers, but also the city police, and also the emergency fire and paramedic. I don't see myself being on this committee because I know how hard it is to make decisions on themselves. And if we keep providing them, like the governments of these states providing free foil, free meth pipes, free needles and stuff like that. How are we ever going to end this problem that we have? I seen it in California, in San Francisco area. If you just look at the news there, you can see it up there in Portland as well, in Seattle and all those areas. So I'm not opposed for helping people, but think we need to do it in a manner where it's not going to impact the residents of this fine town. I mean, I came down here to buy a home. I came down here with my daughter when she bought her home. And I ended up, when I retired in 2018, I ended up in 2020, I think it was, or 2021, I ended up buying a home over here. So I just want to say is that a lot of people were talking about the homeless, how are we going to help them and this and that. But yet we need only one person I heard mentioned about the safety for the children in this community. What about the parents and the grandparents? I'm a grandparent. My wife is as well. And, you know, she likes taking her kids to the parks, you know, our grandkids to the parks. How are we going to deal with the safety of the parents and the grandparents and the children when they're occupying these parks and stuff? I've seen the homeless down in California there where they're just sleeping on the playground equipment, probably using drugs on the playground equipment. Who's going to maintain them? That means we're going to have to increase that Parks Department employees to come in and go through the parks to make sure that nothing is laying out there that's going to be a safety issue for them. What else was I going to tell you about here? I think it's going to have to increase the funds for your police department, for your fire and rescue departments as well, and for your parks departments. We talk about I've heard a lot about different parks, and I've looked at your websites about the locations of the parks and stuff like that. I think that the cities should look into possibly looking into the government looking into the government and seeing what funding is available so that we can, if we have to, because I know it's part of the law that every city has to provide something for the homeless. But yet the thing is that if we're going to have to do that, why not look at a facility and maybe provided the funding by the government of Oregon to provide the funding for a facility so that we can have that. And at least we know that it's monitored not only by the staff, outreach program staff, and we have security that's going to be there, private security that's going to monitor it. You have all the resources there for them, and you're not having to impact the local police or the fire rescue or the paramedics as well. There's a lot to look at, and I understand. Like I said, I would not want to be in your seats right now. I'm just giving suggestions of possible things to look at, but I've seen what it has done to the parks there in California where I was retired from. And believe me, it's not pretty. I went back there a couple months ago to go visit my other home that I have down there. And because my family all live down there as well. And it's still the same. Nothing's changed. You know, it's gotten worse. I mean, we really need to look at what we decide on what we're going to do and not just try to rush into something. Really look at the plan of what you need to do, of what we need to do. I'm saying we. Yeah. So, like I said, I'm not for not helping people. I got a soft heart for helping people. I've always have, but I just do not want to give things to people that don't want to help themselves. Because if you do that, then it's gonna come around and it's gonna keep growing and growing and growing. And next thing you know, I think I don't know, maybe somebody could tell me how many homeless people we have here currently. I've heard a number, but I don't know if that's what.
I think the number that we said earlier was 13
Mm.
and 10. So somewhere around that.
Okay.
Somebody threw out 35, but I'm not sure where that number came from. Yeah.
See, that's the number that I had heard as well. But you want that 13? I mean, that thing is gonna just, once these doors open up, that thing's just gonna grow.
Absolutely.
People are gonna come from all different places. I mean, that's the way it was down there in Oceanside.
Sure.
You know, you talk to some of the homeless people, there was one lady that my wife and I got to know really well that lived on a corner of down the street from where we were at an intersection. And that's where she made her home, right in front of a city pool and on the sidewalk there. And my wife and I would constantly walk every day. And we got to be friends with her. She's a really nice lady. Sad to say, she passed away on the street because it got so cold. But as talking to her, she came from Chicago, you know, and we try to reach out to her and stuff like that, and try to help her out and provide her with resources and stuff. And she didn't want it. That's what she wanted to do.
Yeah.
And I see that around here a lot. But my main thing is making sure we find the right spot that it's not going to impact the community members that live here and that own homes in here in this fine town. My daughter opened up a store here in town as well. And she calls me up during the daytime and she told me that she had homeless people coming in and out and loitering in her store, you know, and she's there alone in her store downtown this fine town of ours, man. And I'm like, well, you know what I got to do? I got to go down there and be her security guard now, but I just want to make sure we make the right call on everything, you know, and not, you know, and not just try to put out a solution on something that's not, when we could have done a little bit better on it, but just take your time on it. And
Yeah.
make sure, because I know it's state law that every city has to provide something. And
Yeah.
I just want to make.
I'll be
sure-
quick.
Oh, you're fine. Yeah, I was just gonna say, we will be spending the
We will.
next several months, many
Yeah.
months, talking
So
about
a
it.
couple of things, it feels like there's a lot of newcomers tonight, which I appreciate. Two things I wanted to address. So the concern about children, many of us are parents here. We've been meeting now. This kind of goes to the second point for months, which I don't think everybody in the community has been aware of. The city of Staten did a really good job early on. This was decided, I think, in November, December.
Yeah.
And we started shortly after.
Yeah.
So although it might feel rushed to some of you that are just learning about this, we have talked this through. I feel very in depth. So hopefully that brings you guys some peace. We didn't just rush into any determination or.
Yeah, I
And-
understand that. I know the point of when this committee was applications were being asked to come in, and I understand that. I was thinking of putting my name on it, but you know, I kind of backed off because I figured, you know, I'm being a new resident here. I just wanted some of the people that have been here for a while to be on that team. But you know, it's just the thing is, it's a problem that, like somebody said, it's a problem that's never going to go away. We just gonna need to make sure that we put the right resources out there that's going to help them and not just provide for them so that they continue to what they're doing. So anyways, that's all I have
And
to say.
I will say, the task force has been meeting for quite a while. The first part, I think, has been rushed, which is why, you know, there is a little bit of confusion. We had a deadline of July 1st where we didn't quite meet that because of the non-unanimous vote by council. But now we have a little bit more time. We have something in place, but we have time to have a more in-depth and more robust conversation. And now there's more people involved, and I think it's only going to get better with the more input that we have. The task force did get a lot of input on the survey, and that was great. And we got a lot of input early on, or some input early on. And now, you know, with more people, we'll just get more input. And I did say that there was a comment that I was going to read. I reread it, and it sounds like they didn't quite want to be recognized or called out. So I'll make a copy of this and send this to the task force, just based on some of the information in there. So, but one of the things that I sort of got from that was that I think it will be important to have people that are experiencing homelessness be part of the conversation so that we're all hearing that as well. So the next meeting is April 14th. Thank you very much. April 14th and August 14th. Yeah, we're just not going to rush it all anymore. Yeah, so August 14th. And I think based on this conversation, I'm going to try to get it to be more of a hearing from different resources, trying to kind of pull in that. And then trying to start shaping what that next round of outreach is going to look like more specifically. The public, we please need you to continue to be involved, because if we don't hear from you, we're not going to be making a decision with your input in mind. So does anybody want to say anything? We did go a little bit long, but I think it was a really good conversation. So briefly, if anybody wants to go around and just share any final thoughts or comments.
I just want to thank the public for being here. The main thing is what everything we're trying to do is for the benefit of the city. And so having the more of you here, I think it just gives us all drive to continue this and see it through to the end. And so thank you for being here.
Yes, I agree. Thank you very much. And please spread the word. We'd love to hear from more people in the community.
How was it communicated? Because I just found out via text message.
Sure.
I don't live in state, but my kids go to school in state, so being concerned.
So I can share how we share information about the meeting. It's on our city calendar. It's posted on our website. I believe we do also post it via social media, but with the algorithms, that doesn't necessarily mean everybody gets it. I also sent it to everybody that I had on my interested parties list via email. So if you gave me your email, you will get notices of future meetings as well.
And Jared and a couple of people share it on the state and community Facebook page too. Jared does a good job of sharing there.
Yeah. Also, if you guys see it posted, share it. Share it to your friends and family, because that is the best way to get out that information.
Resident representatives. So our intent is to represent you all and make sure that we are doing what is best for our community as well.
Yeah. Any other questions?
All right, anybody? All right, then we are adjourned. Thank you. Thank you, Ross and Jared.
Thank you.
I didn't put my emails.
Yes.
I don't have social media.
There you go. Sorry, I just need to stop recording this. If I can figure out how.
Well, I did like,